The President, please be seated. The court is now back in session. We'd like now to hand over to the co-prosecutor to continue putting questions to Mr. Heather. But before that, we would like to hand over to Judge Cartwright to make some observation regarding the proceedings.
Yes, thank you, President. Mr. Heather, the President has asked me to mention a couple of matters to you. First of all, the evidence before this tribunal has certain rules that have already been ruled upon, and that includes that we don't look at the investigation. So if this matter comes up again, the Chamber asks you not to stray into the area of the investigation. Secondly, it would be greatly appreciated, because of time constraints, if you could compress your answers. We all know that undoubtedly you have a great deal of information, but please listen to the prosecutor and keep your answers as brief as possible. And thirdly, earlier this afternoon, the prosecutor asked you to write down the name of an interviewee, which you did. The President has now asked me to ask you to state the name of that person publicly, because he does not have a pseudonym assigned by the court, and therefore it is quite proper for that person's name to be mentioned in open court. President, is that everything? Thank you.
The President, thank you, Judge Cartwright, and Judge Lavian, you may now proceed.
Oui, je ne veux pas confisquer le micro.
I don't wish to monopolize the floor. However, I do have a question of clarification, since this morning and this afternoon, since you were questioned on a certain number of sources that were cited in your publications. There was also reference to a book written by In So-Peep. I wish to know if you describe that document as a typewritten document that was drafted in French, and if the following title rings a bell. The possible translation is Qui sont pas, enlarged and real. Are you aware of this particular reference?
I think that's probably indeed the title that was at the top of the typescript.
Peut-être.
Perhaps you would be so kind as to make that confirmation by tomorrow, and I will hereby advise all parties that the document in question was admitted into the proceedings based on the ruling of the Chamber. Under E/236/4/2. This document has received an E3 classification.
Mr. Heather, can you read the name, please?
The name is Dao Som Ol.
And can you read the document number if there is one? I can't remember if you have the E number on that document or a D number.
It's got a D number, and the D number is D210/10.
Thank you. Can I collect that back just so that it's kept? Can you put that back? I think it's too soon. Now, Mr. Header, Udong, 1974. Is this the sequence of events that the Khmer Republic forces were in control of the town? The Khmer Rouge come in what you described as an attack. You've mentioned evacuation. And on the day you went, the Khmer Republic were back in the town. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Can you help us on how long the attack was on Udong by the Khmer Rouge? Days, hours?
My recollection is that it was over a 24, 36-hour period.
And how long were the Khmer Rouge in control of Udong?
Again, my recollection is a day or so, but I'm frankly not absolutely sure.
In terms of executions, you've mentioned the Buddhist nuns, but you used this phrase, other categories. Now, can you help on your observations or your interviews about other categories?
Again, my vague recollection is there was talk about executions of military personnel, civil servants, and then there was the specific mention of the nuns, and I was then taken or went to see the bodies of the nuns.
Civil servants and soldiers of who?
Khmer Republic civil servants and Khmer Republic military personnel.
Now, from your observations, from the interviews that you conducted, or from any other direct sources, without speculating, did you receive any other information about what had precipitated the evacuation? Humanitarian crisis, bombing, anything of that nature?
I don't recall any explanation as to why the evacuation had been carried out coming up.
Same question in respect of sources. But in the period from 1971 to 1975, 17th of April, did you obtain information about any other evacuations in any other area of the country apart from what you've mentioned about Udong?
Yes, I did do some interviewing after the partial occupation by Khmer Rouge forces of Kampong Cham provincial town, during which, according to what I recall of the interviews, I was told people were evacuated again to the west, and some people were killed on the spot before being evacuated to the west and before the Khmer Republic Marine forces, if I remember correctly, came upriver and reasserted military control over the whole of the provincial town. I think that was September 73, if I recall correctly.
The President, Councillor Can, you may now proceed.
I wish to raise an objection, Mr. President. I believe that we find ourselves in a rather difficult situation. The co-prosecutor, as we clearly see, is asking questions relating to events. And the only answers Mr. Heder is able to provide in good faith, of course, is he did hear about certain events through the interviews he conducted. However, we are here in a legal courtroom. There have been thousands of documents that have been admitted into evidence by this chamber. If there are interviews that comprise the body of evidence that this chamber will take into its deliberations, and that is for you to decide. However, they make up the body of evidence. We are told that Mr. Heder is appearing in the capacity of witness. He is to speak on the method with which he gathered information and evidence for the tribunal. I imagine that his presence at Udong was the subject of possible investigations. However, when he is being asked general and broad questions to which he can only respond, I'm told that, I heard that, so on and so forth, I would point out that he, that is to say the witness, is in a position to describe the situation without any details. He is unable to consult his notes that he would have taken. We have no idea as to whether or not Mr. Heder has the notes with him or if they are at his residence. This brings to mind the testimony of Mr. Chandler, who himself had consulted the notes that he had in his hotel room and that he had to verify during the evening, after which he would provide us confirmation the next day. And Mr. Heder is not appearing as an expert. He has refused to appear as an expert. He is appearing before this court as a witness. And I believe that once again, we appear to be hearing questions that are not being put to a witness, but rather an expert who enjoys certain credibility in order to verify, or in order to state whether or not he had heard certain information.
Memorandum, email, 3rd of July. Mr. Roberts, all parties, quote, "The questions shall be directed primarily to evidence the witness gathered, either during the interviews he conducted, etc. These questions are about the interviews he conducted. The answers are about the interviews he conducted. All these submissions go to weight, not admissibility. The defence can cross-examine Mr. Heder. in the same way they cross-examined Mr. Schamberg on exactly the same sort of themes. I have consistently today restrained my questioning to Mr. Hedder's direct knowledge, interviews he's undertaken. Can I please proceed?
The President. The Chamber notes that the objection by counsel for Mr. Kilsampon regarding the line of questioning by the co-prosecutor is not appropriate and the objection is not sustained. And yes, the co-prosecutor, you may now proceed.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Mr. Hedder, Kampong Cham Provincial Town, September 1973. You interviewing people. They tell you. Some executed on the spot. Who had done the execution?
I was told the incoming Khmer Rouge forces.
Kampong Cham Provincial Town, September 1973. Your interviews told people were evacuated again to the west. Any help on numbers or the extent of that evacuation in Kampong Cham in September 1973?
Again, I don't have the figures in my head, but as I said, the situation as it was described to me after the fact was that only about half the town, or only a part of the town was controlled by the Khmer Rouge, so only those parts of the town that were controlled by the Khmer Rouge were evacuated. People fled from other parts, people hid in other parts, but not the entire population was taken away because not the entirety of the town was seized.
You've given evidence about udong and special categories. Any similar interviewees saying anything about categories of people in respect of execution or evacuation in Kampong Cham in September 1973?
Again, my general recollection is that the same kinds of categories were mentioned, that is to say Khmer Republic civil servants and military personnel in particular.
Right, thank you. Just pause 1 moment. You can close that index binder. Mr. President, I've prepared files for Mr. Hedder. We have indexes to these files. No. Can I hand out copies of the indexes so that everyone knows where I'm going with my questioning, what the files contain, and the purpose is to assist Mr. Hedder by having the material he's authored in front of him so that I don't have to keep asking for a document and getting it back and changing my files. I hope it will assist your understanding of his evidence to have these to hand. Can I please distribute them?
The President, you may proceed, and court officers are directed to bring these documents for the witness and the parties, including the bench, for examination.
Mr. President, given that everyone now has the indexes, can I please now provide the Lever Arch files to Mr. Hedder?
The President, indeed, you may proceed.
Mr. Hedder, 3 additional files. The file on the spine of each file has a number, 2, 3, and 4. Can I ask you, please, to turn to File 2, Tab 7. Document number D210/10. This is now, as far as you're concerned, the statement of the gentleman whose name you gave to the court. I'd like you, please, to turn to it. Easiest for you, page 6 of the statement. English ERN 00436882. Khmer 003921113. French 00463018. So this is your interview with this gentleman. Question at the top of the page, but the place you previously stayed belonged to the East Zone, and I wonder if this can be displayed, please, this document. And the problem started since around 73, and later on you understood that there might be problems within the leadership of the East Zone. Answer from the interviewee. In general, starting from 1973 onward, I started to be suspicious about them because I saw their activities in 73 and 74. They purged the internal cadres and regular cadres, accusing them of being corrupted and wild. At that time, there were just two main accusations, one of which was the immoral act of womanizing, and the second one was the internal enemy burrowing from within. Can you confirm that that is what you were told in this interview?
Yes.
And just to remind us, this interviewee held what position in what sector or zone?
He moved around various positions within the East Zone, and was in several sectors, but ended up as being Secretary of Sitor Kendal District of Sector 22.
Right, thank you. I want to move on to a topic now of the Vietnamese and the Khmer Hanoi. And fortunately, the first question I have is on this same witness statement. Can you turn back one page to page 5? English ERN 00436881. French 00463017. Khmer 00392112. Question, just year 1973? Answer. Yes, since year 73. Because at that time I saw the situation was changed. The first main problem was when they expelled the Vietnamese. They expelled the Vietnamese forces from the Cambodia-Vietnam borders and from our territory in 73. That was around July or August. I do not recall which month exactly. That was the first event. And the second event began in 1973. It was the purge and arrest of the cadres from the North Zone who had been trained in the North Vietnam, in Hanoi. They started to arrest them step by step. Can you confirm that that was what was said to you in this interview?
Yes, except for the fact that I think there is a slight mistake in the translation, where the translation reads North Zone as if it refers to the North Zone of in the Khmer Rouge administrative system. It's actually referring to the northern half of Vietnam. Otherwise, fine.
Next, please. We're going on to another statement now. File 2, tab 1. E number, E31714. First page. So this is at your index 1, file 2, so it's the same file you have, but no, at the front, Mr. Header. You've got numbers going down the tabs. So tab 1, behind tab 1. Yes? Now, this is E3/1714, and can this be displayed, please? The heading of the document, Interviews with Kampuchean Refugees at the Thai-Cambodia Border. February-March 1980, interviewers Masato Matsushita and Stephen R. Heder, graduate student, Cornell University. And you've explained already the background to this, so can I please take you to page 20, and that's using the page numbers shown in the bottom of the document. They're a bit indistinct. Page 20, English ERN 00170712, French 00648977, Khmer 00324703. It references interview number 13, 6th of March 1980 in Sakao, and I just want to read the introduction. Two sources, both are teachers from the Sakao school. One is called Kam, and he was born in Kampong Luan, was in a liberated zone in 1970. He was considered a base person, seems to have some education, but claims to have held no position in the party or in the administration. The other source is named Haim, was an instructor at the Rusekeo Technical School at Kilometre 6, north of Phnom Penh. After 1975, he became an automobile mechanic. Can you confirm that's the people we're speaking about in the context of this interview?
Yes.
Next page, page 21 for you at the bottom, English ERN 00170713, French 00648978, Khmer 00324705. Kem. There were Vietnamese troops in Sector 15 up until mid-1973, when they were driven out. There were continuous negotiations aimed at obtaining the Vietnamese withdrawal from Sector 15 after 1970. But in 1970, the Vietnamese were strong. According to the party position, the Vietnamese had no right to stay there, and the party wished them to leave, but was too weak to get them leave. Starting in 1971, diplomatic and military pressure was put on the Vietnamese to leave. This pressure continued in 1972. In 1973, there were negotiations between Cambodian and Vietnamese commanders, and they agreed in principle that Vietnamese would leave. But some Vietnamese units were stubborn and did not leave, and they had to be forced out. There was a lot of bloodshed in 1973 before all the Vietnamese finally left. After that, we also forced out Vietnamese residents. This was considered a repatriation. The party line was that anyone who loved Kampuchea could stay, but it was made clear that if in the future contradictions developed and Vietnamese residents could not accept the regime in Cambodia, they would not be kept. Can you confirm that that is what was said?
Yes.
Staying within the same document, but going to page 32, English ERN 00170723, Khmer 00324722, and French 00648987. Interview number 18 in Sakao. The source was a man from Tambon 13 in the southwest, presumably a party person. And can I take you to the next page on your document, 33, English 00170724, French 000648988, and Khmer 00324725. At the time of the Lon Nol's coup, Vietnamese troops came into and established state power under their control in Tam Bong 13. The Khmers who had gone to Hanoi in 1954 were put in charge but under the Vietnamese control. I can only remember the name of one of them. Yam was a Khmer secretary, and there were hundreds of such Khmers who came to Tam Bong 13 from Hanoi. The Vietnamese intentions was to control Cambodia the same way they control Laos. From the villages up, Khmers from Hanoi were at the Kum or Gum district and Tam Bong level. I don't know whether there were also such people at the region level. These Khmers were the subject of purges starting in the end of 1971. Is that correct that you were told this by this witness?
Yes.
Next page for you, 34, English 00170725, French 00648989 through 90, Khmer 00324726 through 27. Quote, but by early 1972, all the Khmer forces were turned over to the Khmer organisation. At this time, those Khmers who had come back from Hanoi were not accepted into the Khmer organisation. They were prohibited from mixing in our state power. Neither the military nor the civilian cadres were accepted. Our organisation dealt with this problem in the following manner. We called those Khmers from Hanoi to come to study, and someone led them away. So really, we were expelling them. The majority of these Khmers were in the administrative positions, not military position. These administrators were not concentrators. There was only one or two in each place, separated from each other. So when we began pulling them out, the others did not realize what was happening. And so we were able to get rid of almost all of them. Very few realized what was happening in time and escaped to Vietnam. I don't know where this overall plan came from, but in each level of the Khmer organisation, there were meetings to discuss how to carry it out. Each level received instructions from the level above it. Can you confirm, please, the content on this page?
Yes.
The President, Mr. Witness, please hold on. Mr. Victor Copé, you may proceed.
The question is, from the prosecutor, can you confirm the content of this page? That would imply that what is written down here was actually the truth or actually happened. The question should be, have you written this down? Has somebody told you this? And then, of course, the answer will be, yes, somebody told me this and I've written it down. But it doesn't make it true. So the question should be completely superfluous question, I think, but nevertheless should be, did you write this down? Did somebody tell you that? Nothing more, nothing less.
I agree. Did somebody tell you this, and was it written down?
Yes.
Now, On the description of the person, we've obviously got man from Tambon 13 Takao in the southwest, presumably party person. Can you remember anything else about the position of this person or their status?
No. I have a vague recollection of the guy's appearance, but I couldn't tell you anymore.
Within the same body, so the same document, E31714. Can I now take you, please, to page 54? Can I say? Page 54 for you, English ERN 00170745. French 00649007. Khmer 00324757. Interview number 29 took place at the Navy Camp 62 in Chantaborai, March the 12th, 1980. The source, Logne, also known as Lorne, member of the Kampong Som City Standing Committee. Can you help us on what the Kampong Som City Standing Committee is a reference to?
Yes. Kampong Saum was one of only two places in the CPK structure where they had a municipal committee, the other being Phnom Penh. So this was the party, the CPK leading committee for Kampong Saum City, of which Loing was one of the members.
Your page 57, English ERN 00170748. French 00649010. Khmer 00324763. And can this please be shown? If we had captured Phnom Penh in 1974, it would also have been an evacuation. This had been a long-standing plan. Slogan was, "Dry up the people from the enemy." Is this an accurate recording of what you were told?
Yes.
In the course of all the direct interviews you have had with personnel relating to the Democratic Kampuchea period, has any other witness or any other document that you can recall mentioned the phrase, "Dry up the people from the enemy"?
Yes, many.
The President, witness, please hold on. Counsel Victor Coupe, you may proceed.
Thank you, Mr. President. The request for clarification, the prosecutor was asking about has any other witness? Is that witness in the legal phrase of the word, or is that witness in the sense of an eyewitness that spoke to this witness? We need to have clarification on the use of the word witness.
I agree. As any other, let's break it down. Firstly, has any other individual that you have interviewed directly used the phrase, dry up the people from the enemy?
Yes.
Can you give us some indication, the odd individual, a few individuals? Just paint the picture.
I mean, here I have to generalize. This particular phrase has been mentioned to me by many people over many years. If I had to guess how many, we're talking dozens. And certainly going right back, indeed, to the pre-April 1975 period, when I was in Phnom Penh, I'd already heard this phrase. And I'll add, since you already asked the question, that it also frequently appeared in public broadcasts, both in the pre-April 75 period. The various radio stations that were directly or indirectly under the control of the Khmer Rouge used this phrase in their broadcasts. And if one were to comb through the FIBIS, the FBIS, for the pre-April 75 period, I'm sure you would find numerous references to it.
Thank you. The next page of this individual that you interviewed is page 58 for you, English RN 00170749, Khmer 00324763, French 00649011. After the failure of early 1974 offensive, there were study sessions. In the end of 1974, there were generalized study sessions. The purpose was the preparations for the attack in 1979. Is this an accurate recording of what you were told?
Yes.
I'd like you next, within your file, to go to tab 2. This is your interview with Ieng Sary, 17th of December 1996, E number, E3/89. Can you please turn to page 5 of this document, English ERN 00417603, French 00332. I say again, French 00332685, Khmer 00062457358. We're discussing a September 1978 meeting. Reply, Ieng Sary. And can this be shown, please? No, that matter was not discussed at that meeting. The matter of the evacuation from Phnom Penh had been previously decided. That's according to what I was told. You, February 1975? No, April, May, but in early April or late March 1975, they brought up the possibilities of what to do when Phnom Penh was won. I raised this matter with Pol Pot in 1974, asking what preparations had been made for when we won Phnom Penh. We discussed the population at that time. You, on that, pardon me, where did you meet him? Ieng Sary. I met him near Phnom Penh. I had returned from Beijing. I came back in 73 and met the Prince in Hanoi I went to Beijing and came back in 74. You, when you led the economic delegation to Vietnam and went to Beijing, Ieng Sary. Yes. I returned. And then we discussed what we should do when we won and what preparations should be made. This was the view of His Excellency Zhou Enlai. He had asked me what plans we had after we won. I was in a difficult spot. I did not dare respond at all at the time. I said that I did not yet have any clear knowledge, and he would have to wait until I could ask inside Cambodia. When I did ask inside the country, I did not dare ask about army matters. But I did ask what solution there would be to the problem of the people, what solution there would be to the problem of the 3 million people in Phnom Penh. Pol Pot replied to me that they already had all the experience they needed, and that I should not concern myself with this, and should instead concern myself with my duties abroad. I then said that I had been specifically asked by the Chinese leadership about this problem. He said that it was a very easy matter to resolve, and that our Chinese comrades had nothing to worry about, because we, Khmer, had clear-cut notions in this regard, having been able to solve the problem in Stung Tren and Kratche provinces. So the solution to the problem was to evacuate. That was the only way to solve the problem. I responded by asking whether this meant a total evacuation or what, and he said to wait and see what the concrete situation would be at the time. Nevertheless, the term evacuation was already being used in 1974. Is this an accurate recording of what you were told?
Yes.
Now, just pausing here about the interview with Ieng Sary, can you just give us a flavour of how this interview was set up, what sort of efforts you needed to go to organise the interview? A little bit of background, please.
This happened after Ieng Sary was officially presented as having led a breakaway of Khmer Rouge troops to join the government. And I'd had some contact with Sary by telephone at various points in time, even before that. And then in December 96, I attended an academic conference in Australia, and while I was in Australia, I decided I would try and see Sary on my way back to Europe. So I called him from Australia and said, could I interview you? And he said yes. And I said, where? And he said, Pai Lin. And I said, when? And he gave, I guess it was this date. So I made my way to Chanthaburi, which is the largest Thai town near Pai Lin, made telephone contact with him again, and he explained that the Thai authorities weren't going to allow me to cross into Pai Lin, so therefore he would have to come to see me, and would I please wait for him in a certain hotel. And I proceeded to wait for him in that hotel until he appeared. Then we had a formal interview during which Yi Chien, his aide-de-camp, de facto aide-de-camp, was mostly present, after which we had a meal, and then he returned to Pai Lin.
Thank you. We can see from the front of the document, E3/89, transcript from the audio tape. So, handheld dictaphone, old-fashioned tape recorder, can you help?
It was a little tape cassette machine of the standard kind that journalists used in those days. I think there were 3 cassettes, all told.
Now, can you just help us on... I'm back on page 5 for you, which is the part I've quoted. It's the bit to try and give some timings to what Ingsari, you asked him. Well, let me break it down. He said, I went to Beijing and came back in 74. You asked when you led the economic delegation to Vietnam and went to Beijing, and he said yes. Now, can you help us on what month we are in 1974 for when Ingsari comes back from an economic delegation to Vietnam and went to Beijing?
I'm guessing here, frankly. I think it's late 74, but I would have to check the files.
Right, thank you. I'm moving now to a separate topic. It is the evacuation itself. Mr. President, can I perhaps ask just to ask one part of one book, and then I'm conscious of the time, but I'd just like to at least get into this second subject with one question. Mr. Header, file 2 aside for a minute. Can you please pick up file 4, which is on your seat? It's the bottom file on your seat. File 4, tab 1. Document E190.1.398. Title: Reassessing the role of senior leaders and local officials in democratic Kampuchea crimes. Cambodian accountability in comparative perspective. Can I please take you to page 6? The heading to this part was Rethinking the Dynamics of and Responsibility for DK-era Crimes. Quote: The problem is posed right from the start of CPK rule, notoriously marked by the coercive, violent and murderous evacuation, to use the CPK term, of the population of Phnom Penh and other towns and areas previously governed by Marshal Lon Nol's Khmer Republic. The CPK leadership intended this mass deportation to abolish the urban-based feudalist, bourgeois and petty bourgeois intellectual strata as classes by sending them to live under the political control of the toiling peasantry in the countryside and make them forever a part of a worker peasant class in formation, which was henceforth to comprise 99% of the country's population. Footnote 16 references a notebook of the first ranked it says S2, I don't know if that's right, S2 interrogator Tong Song Huan, alias Pong, in an entry dated the 7th of December 1977. It says here from the archives of the Documentation Centre of Cambodia, hereafter DC Cam collection, author's translation. Can you confirm that that was your source for this statement in your book?
Yes.
That,
and it should be S21, of course.
Now that document, if anyone wants to follow, is D313/1.2.251. Just a little bit of information. This notebook of PON, a little bit more detail, not too much. Can you just describe, please?
This was at a time before DC Cam had cataloged its materials. So this was a notebook in the handwriting of Bon, which was among the many documents that were then in DC Cam's uncatalogued possession.
Thank you. Mr. President, I said one theme. I hope that's been covered. Can I please just make this observation, that the application made this morning used up 1 hour of the prosecution's time. Can I please ask that that's borne in mind? Thank you. And thank you, Mr. Header.
The President, the request is well-grounded and appropriate. The Chamber will definitely consider granting extra time to compensate the time lost. Mr. Co-Prosecutor, you already asked the Chamber that the document be delivered to the witness. Can you advise the Chamber as to how you managed to have them delivered? The documents that you already delivered rather to the witness now, it's time for adjournment. Can you advise the Chamber as to how these documents can be managed?
Mr. President, can I suggest that we keep them? We've had them all day. We are going to effectively just store them overnight and then bring them back to court tomorrow if that meets with the court's satisfaction.
The President, that is fine. Thank you, Mr. Co-Prosecutor, for the clarification. And we expect that by the end of the session today, the documents would be retrieved from the witness by the court officer, and tomorrow the documents can be delivered back to the witness for further examination. Now it is appropriate moment already for today's adjournment. The Chamber will adjourn now, and the hearing will resume tomorrow at 9 a.m. During tomorrow's sessions, the Chamber will continue hearing the testimony of Mr. Header. Questions continue to be put by the co-prosecutors. Mr. Steve Header, your testimony has not yet been complete, and the Chamber would like to hear more from you tomorrow. So please return to the courtroom by 9 a.m. Court officer is now directed to assist Mr. Steve Header during the adjournment and have him return to the courtroom by 9 a.m. tomorrow. Security personnel are now directed to take Mr. Nuanchi and Khieu Sampon back to the detention facility and have them return to the courtroom by tomorrow morning at 9 a.m., saving Mr. Nuanchi, who is directed to be brought only to his holding cell downstairs, where he can observe the proceedings from there through audio-visual link. The court is adjourned.